Saints fans, much less of a good vibe this week. It was not a pretty game to watch, not a pretty game to be at. It just a good first half, I guess, tailed by a second half that was just wet weather footy, pretty gross to watch. We did not match the conditions the way Adelaide did, and here we are, one of our biggest losses for the season, unfortunately. Jake is out this week. The two of us were sitting in the cheer squad in the rain. Jake did not have a poncho, which is probably why he's not here today. He was getting drenched along with Jaden from the teams. But of course, Sammy, you're here with us today. How you got, mate?
Yeah, not too bad. Not too bad. Obviously, it's a very disappointing game, and there's a couple of disappointing things that have occurred in the outfall of that in this week. But a week at a time, I guess it gives us time to sort of reflect and see what's going wrong, both on and off the field for the club.
Yeah, definitely not a great couple of days for the club, to say the least. But before we get into it, I just want to say my quick experience of the Adelaide Ovals. The first time watching footy there. Really good oval to watch footy at. It is not Marvel though, so if it rains, you are going to get drenched. Luckily, had the poncho sitting in the cheer squad. We were getting the first half. I thought, I mean, let's just get into the game, I guess. Then the first half, we were looking all right. I thought maybe the first quarter we probably dominated. Second quarter broke even. And then fell apart from there. Anyway, it was cool to be out the hill. I can see why people are attracted to standing on there. It's good fun. Jake came and joined me for the second half. So yeah. Anyway, Sammy, what do you think of this game?
Look, it's sort of another game of what if, right? First quarter, I thought we're on here. We could do something good. We didn't capitalise on all the opportunities we had, which I thought was a little bit disappointing, considering how much of the ball we had and how much time we spent in the forward 50. Second half, the wheels sort of came off a bit, and we were really just bullied into submission in the second half. We were just totally flaccid, mostly uncompetitive. The skills were appalling. The decision making was appalling. It was very much a tale of two halves, but the game was won and lost in that third and fourth quarter. We just got torn apart.
Yeah, exactly right. The last quarter particularly, I thought, but the first 5 minutes of it, we were still 2 goals, only 8 points, I think, away from Adelaide. So the game was close, but in a blink of an eye, it almost felt like Thilthorpe kicks a couple of goals, and they just started piling on in the end, which it is a weird game to come away and go, gee, we lost that by 5 goals. We only kicked 5 goals for the game because, like you're saying, it really did feel like we had something going there. But I guess when after quarter time you kick 2 goals for the rest of the game, you're just never going to win a game of footy. Yeah. But in saying that, I think you just mentioned, but we missed a lot of crucial opportunities early. Marshall had a set shot from about 15 out. Sharman missed a couple. Just that Philippou, even in the third quarter, had a set shot that should have gone through that hit the post. You got to capitalize. It's just accuracy. Good kicking is good footy.
Well, absolutely. And I know there's a few supporters out there who are blaming the conditions and otherwise. To be honest with you, I don't see that as a viable excuse. Move down to Melbourne and look what Melbourne and Essendon did. You don't see either of those teams scoring 39 points in a game. Even though Essendon lost, it's still a 67-point game. I just don't see that as a valid excuse. It was really a failure to capitalise on opportunities that we had throughout that game. And there were multiple. At the end of the day, I still think we would have lost, realistically, just with the way that we were playing. But if we had have capitalised on the opportunities we had, kicked those easy goals, it would have been a lot more flattering than what it was.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that stands out to me, at least, is just the lack of adaptation to those conditions. It felt like Adelaide knew exactly what they were doing, whether or not that's because, we're always playing at Marvel, so we just don't have to play in those conditions as regularly. Whatever it is, we didn't adapt to it. We saw it last year against Richmond, and we continue to play the game as if the conditions hadn't changed, which was probably the most frustrating thing to me. Clearly, the rain was coming down. The skills were always going to get a little worse for wear. You just have to find a way to adapt to those conditions. And then in the last quarter, when they start to pile on a few, we're down by 3 goals, which in the wet is, is more like 4 or 5. We just continued kicking the ball to the boundary, forcing stoppage, and then repeat, and it just felt like just doing the same thing over and over again, never taking the game on, going through the middle. So, ultimately, you have to adapt to the conditions and not play as if we're under the roof at Marvel.
Yeah, and that was the thing that separated, this week and last week. Last week we looked like world beaters,
Mm.
and this week just reverted back to that stagnant, boring, suppressed defensive ball movement where we're overutilizing the wings, we're overutilizing certain players, we're playing for the stoppage. It was a really tough watch in the end. It was a tough watch of football in that second half, at least.
Yeah.
And I don't know why we went back to that. Obviously the conditions didn't permit to have as much run and dare as we did last week. But again, that's just an excuse, right? You should have the ability and have the skills to be able to work and adapt to those conditions, just like Adelaide did.
Yeah. No, exactly right. And just like some, I guess, I don't know if this is from the coaching box or if this is just an execution thing, but we actually got a decent amount of entries, I felt like, but they were just able to rebound the ball way too easily. Every time we got it in, it just came straight back out. Whether that's us not having Max in there, this week, if it had something to do with that. Also, our smalls just didn't fire. I know Butler laid 10 tackles, but Higo effectively went missing. Butler, he did do some good pressure acts and laid some good tackles, but ultimately didn't hit the scoreboard, which we needed to. Henry had a quiet game and just felt like that forward line, outside of Sharman's fantastic first quarter, just didn't fire.
Yeah, and when you're trying to hit them on the head and not on the chest in wet weather conditions, you're not really giving them a chance to succeed. And that was the problem as well. Why are you trying to create an overhead mark when it's wet? It went straight through their fingers multiple times. Instant rebound from Adelaide's back 50 and right back into our forward line. We were just stitching ourselves up through the middle.
Yeah, exactly. And I think something else that was so frustrating was that so many of their goals were just from poor defense or just little mistakes in the D50, whether it's them getting out the back, a silly free kick, whatever it was. It would like some of their goals felt so unearned, but it was just us spilling the ball, coughing the ball up. And yeah, I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I agree. And it was decision making under pressure. There were two moments where it was sort of a, hand in your face sort of moments. One was the Ari Maker run toward the ball, totally coughed it up, ended up being a turnover and a straight goal. And the other one was Dougal Howard holding Thilthorpe, which, people can argue about that rule, but unfortunately it is holding any day of the week and that is a free. It's just, it's poor decision making and it's poor defending. And I think there are a few players who, when they are under duress and when the rest of the team is under duress, make really silly errors that result in really costly turnovers. And it always happens in our back half. It's always a couple of defenders that, are complicit when it comes to this sort of thing, be it Riley Bonner, Dougal Howard. Dougal's not as bad anymore, but I do notice it quite a bit that under duress, he makes very, very silly errors.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And from the more senior guys, it's hard to watch, but you can kind of not forgive, but come to terms with at least a Shawmaker or even a Wilson making that sort of error because they're first year players. That's how it happens. But I think that's where a lot of the frustration comes with some of those players. But on a more positive note, Mateus Philippou had another fantastic game. One of, if not our best out there. He kicked a monstrous goal, which me and Jake were right behind in the cheer squad, which was awesome to see. 20 touches, 9 tackles, 5 clearances. Didn't quit all day. And you know what I loved? We talked about last week, another crest pump after the goal. So absolutely loved Mateus's game. What did you make of it?
I thought it was really good. It's hard to fault someone that has the self-awareness to admit that, okay, I need to improve. I need to go elsewhere to improve my craft. When I feel like the time is right and I'm ready, I will come back. He's gone and done that. I think that's really impressive from someone who's as young as him, who you'd expect to just be like, oh, well, I just want to play at AFL level every week, regardless of my output. But to move on to his game, I thought it's just another example of what he can be. Now it's just capturing that consistency because we've all seen what is near of the Everest peak of what he's capable of at the moment. But yeah, I want to see that continue because it's really fantastic to watch and just his endeavour in his class, which so many of the players on Saturday night were lacking, particularly at the endeavour part. There are a lot of complacent passengers, particularly in the second half of the game, which is really disappointing to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And another moment which it was probably not his greatest moment where he's running through the middle. He got down to some space and then in the wet tries to take a bounce, ends up getting cleaned up. It was a bad look for him, but I just loved straight away, got straight back up, and then there was a stoppage, ran there with and attended that. You know, that's what you love to see from a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah, exactly. It's those second efforts, but it's not just from a 19-year-old kid. It's from any player. If you make a mistake, follow up, follow through with your work. And unfortunately, there are a lot of players in our team who don't do that.
Yeah. No, exactly right. Someone who I mentioned earlier, but Sharman started like a house on fire, had 2 goals in the first quarter, had a really nice run down tackle, which led to a set shot on goal. What did you make of his game? Because it was such a great start, but he really faded as the game went on.
Yeah, it was such a great start. But again, that consistency component, the whole team, the entire team got nullified in that second half, as did he. He just got pushed out of the game. He was totally ineffective. First half, our pressure was elite. Second half, our pressure was close to poor. And you know, it's unfortunate because I think if we look at it as a holistic perspective, 2 goals in a game, I think that's a pretty good outcome for any forward in our team, particularly when we don't really score too many goals. But yeah, definitely a disappointing second half. He was not to be seen. But then again, most of the players weren't to be seen, so I can't really nitpick with him. What did you think?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, no, I agree. Like there was a few that I was just going to bring up. Darcy Wilson and Mitch Owens, just 2 that I haven't really seen much from at all these last few weeks. And those were 2 that maybe where no one else is lifting, one of them can get a lift. But Mitch, again, is struggling. I'm not sure that's entirely his fault. I think he's struggling to know where he lies within this team. Darcy, it's a first-year player. I understand that. But what's your take on what's going on with those 2 players? Because it just feels like 2 that have shown such great promise that have just really struggled to so I'm getting a phone call here. 2 that have just really struggled to reach that potential.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a compounding of multiple things. One, particularly for Mitch Owens, I think it is a positional thing, and he looks a little bit lost out there. I don't think he quite knows what he's doing. Darcy Wilson, I think he's burnt through his tank. We've got to remember that guy's 18. He's played a lot of games back to back. Now, your body at that sort of age is not going to hold up for that period of time. Now, is it best to send them both back down to the 2s and give them a bit of a reset? I don't know. That's for them to work out and them to decide. But something has to change. But it's sort of how they're playing at the moment captures how the whole team is playing at the moment. If we look at the season as a whole, which is we are playing without confidence. And it's not just applicable to them, it's applicable to a lot of other players in the side. And as to where that stems from, whether it's like results, whether it's their own personal performances and they're hanging their heads, I don't know. But it's definitely, confidence is key, and the lack of confidence is showing in both their play at the moment.
Definitely. And it seems to be some of that frustration does look like it's boiling over a little bit at times, just from sitting behind the goals. I could see multiple times Callum Wilkie being exceedingly frustrated with different players in different circumstances, which, it's one of those things Lee Montagna talked about in the preseason. When we're going to play our best football is when that younger group of players starts playing at the level that our senior group of players are, the Mason Woods, the Marshalls, Steele, Sinclairs. Once our young players can reach that sort of level is when we're going to be able to see that lift. And you can see that it's getting frustrating for some of those senior players like Wilkie, because I guess it's taking longer than usual. I don't know if that's an overread from me, just from one game, seeing him get frustrated, but that's just sort of how I'm looking at it.
But, I don't think so. And at this point in the season, frustration is fair. And the reason that frustration is fair is because we're seeing the same thing week in, week out, and it's getting a little bit boring because nothing's changing, nothing's moving. And, we all know what the definition of madness is. Yeah. So I think that something has to change. I think that whatever game plan is in place is not working. It hasn't worked really all season, bar the Sydney game. Now, there are some people online that are arguing that they kept us in that game because of their misses, and obviously football is a game of inches and we capitalised, they didn't. So either way you could go, but I think at the end of the day, a lot of changes need to be made, both positional in terms of strategy. I think a new forward line coach needs to be employed. I don't think Robert Harvey's is making the cut at the moment. It's not working for him. It's not working for them. There's a lot of things that need to change in the off season to sort of propel this group forward, because what we're doing at the moment is failing pretty miserably at the best of times. So I think we need to reflect and reanimate what's going on.
Yeah. Yeah, no, you're not wrong. I think it's speaking of that forward line, someone who's almost become one of our best avenues to goal is Mason Wood. He kicked 2 of our 5 goals on the weekend. Can't believe I just said 5 goals was our total there, but, but he kicked 2 of our 5 goals. And he actually has been, quite a threat in our forward 50. I think he's still playing on the wing. We have moved him there at times, but he's someone who's actually out of contract this year. So, speaking of those list changes, etc., I feel like he's someone you want to probably narrow down for at least another 2 years. He's only 30 years old.
Yeah.
He seems to have such a great impact on the club with his leadership and his experience and all that. So yeah, really love his work. Would love to see him get extended.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. And, there's a couple of players around there. It is worth keeping them around, particularly from a leadership, mentorship perspective. Now, whether that be a Tom Campbell or Mason Wood, I think that these people, their value as people certainly outweighs their on-field talent, because they bring so much to the club, particularly off the field. And I think that's a really important aspect to focus on as well.
Yeah, definitely. And just another one who I think's going under the radar these last 2 weeks, it's been really good, is Ryan Burns. I thought he's one of those younger players who, as well, I'm pretty sure he's out of contract. Might need to double check that one. Who I'd love to see go on. He's shown some really good glimpses of what he's capable of these last 2 weeks. There was this one moment where I think it was on our 50. He just does this one-handed pickup, kick to the top of the square in the wet. He's really classy with the ball at times, runs very hard. I love his endeavor.
Yeah, and he's getting better.
Yeah.
He is one of the few players that you can look at across this season and go, from a week-to-week basis, whether it's a small fraction, he is improving. But the thing I love about him is he never gives up. He's never going to die wandering, because the endeavour, the tenacity, the dedication to try and win is always there with him. He's one of those players that you will always have confidence in to turn up and try his absolute hardest.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of endeavour, we'll get to some talking points around this player later, but Zach Jones, I thought his execution wasn't quite there on the weekend, but he's another one who his endeavour, I actually thought this game suited a player like him who probably isn't the cleanest with the ball, but he just can get territory, win a hard ball. Yeah. His endeavour was really good, but yeah, it was just that execution that probably let him down.
Yeah.
And he's one that we'll see if he's sticking around next year or not.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think with, again, like the thing with Zach is we know he's not a bad player. We've seen him at his best. I think what lets him down is his decision-making ability. Sometimes makes some really poor decisions and gets sucked into doing silly things off the ball, which I think, really detracts from his game. But in terms of endeavour and commitment to the cause, I thought he was pretty good. He was a lot better than a lot of other players out there, that's for sure.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And don't want to just go through all the players here, but just one last one from me, Jack Steele as well. I thought he had a good game. He had some nice clearance work. He had 10 tackles, just worked hard all day, used the ball pretty well considering the conditions, I would have thought. He's one as well in that, in that senior group, which when those young players can reach that level, hopefully, those guys are still around and at least close to their prime, so I thought another good game from him.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
Yeah, for sure. And also, if you haven't already checked it out, I actually had the pleasure of interviewing Steely during the week, which was awesome. Super nice guy. Great interview. Check that out. And I just want to give a big shout out to Jack, who's been helping Jake and I out. Not Jack Steele, Jack, the cameraman. And he actually runs, he told me this while we were doing it. He runs the Saints Memes IG page with a few of his mates. So shout out to him and shout out to Saints Memes. And another St Kilda figure I met on the week was Andrew Bassett. I just ran into him on the street walking home from my car, walking to the car, and got to have a good 2-minute conversation with him and I believe his son. And as soon as I was kind of calling for him, I'd had a few beers. He's probably thinking, "Oh Jesus, I don't want to interact."
Who's this Nuffy?
Yeah.
Did you tell him? Did you tell him? Did you ask him if he listens to the podcast?
I was kind of trying to tell him that I loved the time where he was on Saints TV and like I'm doing a bit of that these days. And his kid was saying, "Oh yeah, like big fan." I'm not quite sure he knew what I was talking about. That's probably my fault though.
Yeah, the beers were talking.
Yeah. As soon as I did see him though, he just like he was like, oh, geez, how disappointing is that? And for people who are in doubt of him, that's you're allowed to think that. But I love the man's passion. I think there was a clip that came out last week of his reaction to us beating Sydney, of course, and you can see the disappointment on his face after a loss. So that was nice to run into him after the game.
Yeah.
What else do we have to go over here? And any other points from the game that you want to go through?
No other points really, apart from I think the team needs a little bit of a shake-up. We're at the point where we are so far down the ladder. Let's just try some things, move around some pieces, move some new players into the team and see how they go. Whether it be your Max Hall, maybe even give Matt Allison a run and see how that turns out. We have nothing to lose from doing that at this point. The season is already gone. It's already been flushed down the drain as far as I'm concerned. We may as well start taking a gamble and playing some new players. So I'd really like to see that in the coming weeks because I think it would be a worthwhile experience before we move into next year and work out what we're doing.
Yeah, definitely. No, we'll for sure get to that as well. A few quick things that I want to talk about was how was Josh Rochelle almost taking Dougal Howard's head off? It just kicking in danger not exist anymore because I saw it both sides. Like we were playing in the wet, so of course there's a lot of kicking off the ground.
Yeah.
Both sides were doing it, and they did not pay one. Does it not exist? And Rochelle got a $5,000 fine for it, but there was no.
Yeah. I mean, the thing I didn't understand is why was deliberate getting called every 30 seconds? The ball is wet; it's skidding across the ground. The umpiring in that game was appalling. They were umpiring dry conditions.
Yeah,
that's what it looked like. But for both sides, there were decisions going either way that I thought, geez, there's just nothing in that. But that was one of the missed calls where I thought, okay, well, that's a free any day of the week. But what can you do?
Yeah, the insufficient intent rule. And I was watching the replay earlier, and the commentators just could not believe half of the ones that were getting paid. It was you just kick it forward to get territory. The ball would happen to bounce out, sort of like that the Josh Battle one last week against Sydney. And you get pinned for it, which was bloody unlucky.
It was just comical in the end. Like that's what it was. It was just a joke. Even the commentators were laughing about it. Like you couldn't take it seriously.
No, exactly right. And last thing on the rain, I guess, what is our way forward with that? Because as we know, grand finals, you play them at the MCG. You're very unlikely to get a home final at Marvel. No other stadium in the country has a roof. So wet conditions may come when it matters most for this team, and hopefully, we're around that mark in a few years' time. What do we do here? Because it can sort of equalize a game. The good old days down at Moorabbin where they'd wet the ground to sort of equalize it. Our game is very possession based, and in the wet, it's super hard to execute those skills. So, what is the way forward with that? Because we just look like we can't do it right now.
Well, I believe what they did down at Richmond was they would turn the sprinklers on. And they quickly became one of the best wet weather teams in the comp. So if it's worth doing that, because at the end of the day, it's still going to refine your skills and it's going to refine your decision making because you're going to be under duress most of the time because it is wet and because the game is going to be either faster or slower pending conditions. So even if it's something as simple as that, it might be worth it because the unfortunate thing about Marvel is we are very shielded from basically all weather conditions. There's no wind. There's no rain, there's no sun. Every other stadium around the country does have all those elements. So if you can't adapt to them and you can't play in them, you're going to lose.
Yeah. No, exactly right. We need to find a way, whether that is turning the sprinklers on at training or whatever it is, where the footy is just a thing that exists, and we're going to have to find a way to persist through that. Hey, let's get into some mosh back to your best. A player we haven't mentioned yet who had a cracking game, was in our top couple on the ground for sure. Hunter Clark, beautiful game, had 17 contested possessions, 8 clearances, as well as 5 tackles. I thought he was one of his best games yet. People talk about him, where his role is on this list. Is he too slow? Where is he? I thought this was one of his best games for a while. People need to realize this kid has battled through so many injuries. He's a top 10 pick for a reason. Let him find his confidence again at AFL level, especially at this point of the season for us. Like, let's be honest, we're obviously not making finals. We still want to be competitive in every game, but let us see what Hunter Clark's got to offer, because I think he's either out of contract or got one more year left on it. But yeah, he had a fantastic game, and it's definitely back to your best. What did you think of his game?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And there's all, at the end of the day, all these statistics, disposals, centre clearances, stoppages, all that sort of stuff, it doesn't really mean much unless they're effective, because you can get a clearance and turn it over and it's still a clearance.
Yeah.
But the thing about what Hunter Clark did on the weekend is they were effective. He was clean by foot, mostly clean by hand. But he actually damaged the opposition and damaged them with his disposal efficiency. And read the play really well and adapted to the conditions so much better than anyone else did, because he was one of the few players who was actually hitting a target when it was wet.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's amazing how clean he still looked despite the conditions. And I think it stood out even more to us because he was one of the few doing it, at least on our behalf. But join over 30,000 other guys in the Mosh Hair Regrowth family and get $50 off your first treatment plan with code SAINTS50 at checkout. Completely customized, totally online, and cheap hair regrowth solutions from $45 a month. Smarter hair loss treatment all starts with a quiz at getmosh.com.au. Sammy can speak for himself. It's great.
Yeah, product. if you want hair like me, get onto Mosh. It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
And hey, look at that. If you're listening, get onto YouTube and check out Sammy's haircut. Why wouldn't you want that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Before we get jump into Jakey's junk mail, Sammy, I think there's been a few incidents over the last couple of days, which has been quite frustrating to see. The first of which was just a bit of hate mail sent towards one of our players, which was just really ugly to see, especially from one of our own fans. And of course, you can speak to this, but on just behalf of Saints TV, it's not on. Never, ever, ever go after a player messaging them like that. And if you're going to criticize a player, you don't need to DM them, and you can do that on the forums, whatever you want, and keep it about footy. Never needs to get personal, but yeah, really disappointing to see.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think these personal attacks and these messages, and it's becoming a bit of a consistent theme, whether it be towards Bonner, Max King, Jones. Yes, some of them are down on form. Yes, some of them have not had the greatest game. That does not give you the right to throw abuse, make verbal attacks, or make personal attacks toward them. It's just totally unacceptable at the end of the day, and it's not something that's welcome in this environment, in this club. And I don't know why people think it's okay, because it's absolutely not. And I need to make that absolutely crystal clear, is that behaviour is unacceptable and not tolerated in any way, shape or form.
For sure. Yeah, we're not welcoming anyone who contributes to that sort of hate around here. Another unfortunate incident was Lance Collard is currently under investigation for making a homophobic slur in the VFL. Obviously, he's not playing VFL. It's not playing AFL right now, but AFL's made it pretty clear where they stand on this sort of stuff. So he's probably going to take a fair bit of time out of it. He's obviously a first-year player. Hopefully, he can just learn from this one and we can move on.
Exactly. But again, this is a thing it's becoming boring, and it's embarrassing that we have to keep having this conversation. And I will put out there that if you are someone that thinks that behaviour is okay or acceptable in any way, I'll stand by the sentiments of the AFL and echo that you are simply not welcome at games. That's how it is. That behaviour is not acceptable. It's not tolerated in any way, shape or form. And we shouldn't be having these conversations as frequently as we are. It's boring and unnecessary.
Yep. I can't add anything more to that. Completely agree. Let's get into some Jakey's junk mail, shall we?
Let's do it.
Jakey's junk mail. Jakey's junk mail. Jakey's junk mail.
Jakey's junk mail.
I'm no Jake.
Yeah, I know. With
it's
no
weird,
Jake.
isn't it?
It feels weird. I'm like going through these questions today, thinking, watching Jake's performance on Jake's junk mail. I'm not sure if I'm going to quite live up to the standard that he sets, but I'm gonna try my very best here. So let's find these questions. This first one is from Tawanda79. Probably I'm gonna butcher all these names, so apologies in advance. Are there concerns / issues with conditioning of players due to our games being played under roof? We sort of touched on this already, but is playing at Marvel sort of staggering our development to be able to play wet weather footy, Sammy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the answer is fairly obvious. As I said, we're shielded from all the conditions. It's not exactly conducive to games of football, which more often than not are out in the open.
Yeah, no, exactly right. This next one from Senadio. I might give up on the names because I can't read for shit.
Fair enough.
Bit of a more general footy question. Is the time of the tall forward coming to an end due to a changing game?
No. Absolutely no. There's always going to be a place for a tall forward. I don't know where that's come from, but okay. There's always going to be a place for a tall forward. Not everyone's a Collingwood Football Club and can win a flag without one. You've got to remember that. Just because they did it doesn't mean everyone else can. Tall forwards are needed. They are a necessity in teams.
Yeah. I'm not sure if that's off the back of maybe King being out and us playing more medium-sized forwards, but no, I think all the good teams right now, they have a key forward. Look at what Carlton's doing with two of them. Like, they're arguably second best team in the competition right now. Here we go. One word answers from all of us for 2025: battle or band one compensation pick.
Band one compensation pick.
I'm going battle only because he's still 25. There's so much good footy.
I was going to say no comment because either way, to be honest with you, I would be happy. Like I'm absolutely on the fence about it. So, but you said one word, so
yeah.
Oh, but I mean that was three, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it's likewise. It's either way we sort of win, but we lose both ways. You know what I mean? So, I think it's going to be one of those things that we talk about every week from now because it's just going to drag on into the off season. Okay, sorry, I'm terrible at the questions, guys. I should have done some more.
Take your time. I got it all
night. Do we think we'll see any retirements / farewell games this year from us?
Well, I mean, we're only hypothesizing, aren't we? Because we don't know what's going to happen. Now, there are obviously players who have been injured consistently for extended periods of time. They might be forced to retire or just retire. There are obviously players who are well into their greatest hits twilight era, so they'll probably retire as well. But as to who those players are, it's up to them at the club at the end of the day. I don't want to speculate.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think we're going to see list changes inevitably. So yeah, it's just part of football right now. Part of football always. So this one's from Rossi. How do we get the best out of Sharman next year when King comes back?
I think we should do what they did with Carlton. I think Sharman should be our full forward and Matt should be our centre half forward. Free him up a little, give him more space to move, do exactly what Harry Mackay is doing. Just watch Carlton games. Look what Harry Mackay is doing and do that. I think that will work for the type of player he is and his athleticism.
Yeah. Do we think Sharman's in our best 22-23 next year?
Yeah, I do. He's kicking more than enough goals a game, and a lot of our other forwards aren't. So I would say, yeah.
So would you play Hammer, King, Sharman in the same lineup?
I would love to see how Hammer goes down back because I think there's something there. It was definitely an odd move, but I would love to see how that pans out because I think there's something there. But in the same forward line, all three of them can't work. It's just not going to happen. But Hammer, could he be a battle replacement? I don't know. If he can build his craft, let's have a look.
Yeah, for sure. This one is from Bryce, I believe. What does our club have to offer that you would think can attract star free agents?
Do you want me to be brutally honest?
Go for it.
At the moment, there is not a single reason that a player from another club would come to St Kilda if it wasn't for money. And I know that's probably really harsh, but at this point in time, that's all we have to offer because we don't really have much anything else on paper at the moment.
Yeah, no, for sure. From a purely football standpoint, not talking about sort of the externals of like area or whatever. I think for some players, having Ross Lyon as a coach is potentially something that could lure some people. He's pretty highly endorsed among the playing cohort, at least by you listen to some of the stuff that the former Freo players had to say about him. Of course, our boys back in 09 and 10 have a lot of good things to say about Ross. That's something potentially you could always sell. We're a young list, we're improving. We've got a few star players that our young group is building around and all that. So I think there's something there, but after a loss like this, and not even a loss like this, just a season that we're having, it is hard to look for those sorts of things for sure. Should the club target a new young ruck to grow if Heath and Campbell end up not lasting? If so, who? So a backup ruck for Rowe.
Yeah, we have other areas to focus on, and I hate to say it, but are ruckmen really that important? Because look at what Melbourne did without a ruck on the weekend. It is a position on the ground that is slowly fading out. It does still play a role, but the good teams have rucks who can play all around the ground, and those players are few and far between. So in answer to that, no, we've got to focus on other things. I think that's at the lowest end of the pecking order.
Yeah, no, likewise. And I think /hope Heath gets at least one more year. Campbell is probably just at that age where it's just the time is going to come. Who knows? I don't want to, theorize about that too much. I'd like to see Heath, continue on as that backup. And we've developed him for the last 2-3 years. It would be really nice to see him get a game in these next few weeks, maybe even this week. Who knows? But that is Jake's junk mail delivered by Ari. Next week, Jake will definitely be back to do that a lot smoother and cleaner as we did this week. But let's talk about West Coast. We've got Hilly's 250th coming up, which I think he's played just about more games for us than he has any of his other clubs. So he's a secured player now. Yeah,
he has. And do we know if his child is male or female?
We don't. I don't even know if he's had the child yet. Which, of course, that's why he wasn't playing on the weekend. For anyone who didn't know.
Want to start looking at those father-son pics. Anyway, self-interest aside. I'm excited to see what Hilly does for 250. I know he loves a big stage. He gets up for these sort of events. So it'll be nice to have him back. And we missed him on the weekend. We really did.
Yeah, he's had an underrated year, I reckon. He's been really good for us. He's probably going to be top 5 at least in the best and fairest, maybe even top 3. I could see. So, yeah, it'll be good to have him back and celebrate his 250th. Just talking about some VFL stats. Houghton had 26, which was one of his best, I've noticed. Stocker had 25, Hasty 22, Seb Ross 21 and a monstrous 14 tackles. Max Heath 15 and 2 goals, and Matty Allison, the standout performer, 5 goals for Sandringham. So it's potentially a debut coming up for him. It's the second time he's done that, and we always bang on about you got to consistently perform at VFL, and it's had another good performance. Garcia didn't play because he travelled up with the team to Adelaide, but. Yeah, how'd you feel about some of the stats from the VFL and selection going into this week?
Yeah, I did see Matt Allison's game. I know that I'm pretty certain he's nearing the end of his contract. He's yet to make his debut. He was our first pick in the 2021 draft or 2020 draft.
He was technically a first round pick, but he was picked like 25.
Yeah,
all the father sons and stuff.
At this point, I'd say, what do we have to lose? What's the worst that can happen? Just play him, see what happens. Maybe we find a diamond in the rough. I don't know. But, it's better knowing than not knowing at all, right? Not playing these players ever at AFL level and not ever learning what they might be capable of. So I think that would be worthwhile giving him at least one crack because he's done the same thing twice, which to me says, okay, well, there's something there. Your best is good enough. If you're kicking 5, that's quite. It's not like you're kicking 2. That's quite a lot of goals. So I think we've got to recognise that at some point.
Yeah, no, I think I'm with you. It's just one of those things. Whether the spot's there for him or not, we'll see. This week, my mock team was bringing in Hill, Garcia, and Heath, and making way would be Bonner, Jones, and Patton. Garcia, we've banged on about him for the last 3-4 weeks, it feels like. I think he's just ready to come back, play some AFL, see how he goes, give him a chance. Even if he has one game, doesn't perform, we throw him back to VFL. At least you reward that form. Hilly's an obvious callback. And then Max Heath, he's the one for me. I've been talking about him for the last few weeks. He's performed consistently in the VFL. Yes, Matty Allison has had those 2 games, but I think Heathy's been doing it for a long time. all year. He gets a goal, helps Tommy Campbell out in the ruck pretty well, and gets his hands on the ball a lot. So I'd like to see him come back. Bonner, there's a lot of conversation around him. His form has just been very rocky. He got subbed out, so that might show he's slightly out of favor with Ross right now. Jonesy, as well, probably a bit down on his form. And Patton, it's a weird one for me, Ben Patton. I'm not sure why he's a sub, because if he's in the team, I feel like you start him on halfback or in the back pocket, shutting down a Toby Green, Charlie Cameron type player. But yeah, starting as a sub is weird. Anyway, what are your thoughts on selection this week?
Yeah, there's definitely a few changes that I would make. And there's obviously going to be question marks over, well, do we bring back a Paddy Dow? Do we bring back a Liam Stocker? Like what's going on with them? What players need a rest? Because I really think Darcy Wilson, I think he needs a week or two in the twos. I really think it would be beneficial for him because he just looks totally burnt out at the moment. So whether you bring in, I don't know, a Max Hall in place of him or someone like that, I think that would be worthwhile. But as I said, now is the time to get experimental. We have nothing to lose, obviously, bar games. We have nothing to lose in the way of player selection and finding out what people are capable of. If this is to be the year of experimentation, make it that. Because we're not gaining anything by playing the same players who are giving us the same output, which isn't particularly good week in, week out.
No, exactly right. Another thing just to bring up is Battle did go off the end of the game with an injury, so potentially he could miss a week or two. I'm not even sure what the injury was, but that was noted. But yeah, it'll be an interesting one. The Wilson one is interesting. It's one of those things. Some players going back to the twos is really beneficial. Just look at Mateus Filippo. Whereas some players, they sort of just get buried there. And a first-year player, are you killing his confidence by doing that? Like, that's a whole other discussion right there. I don't even know where I stand on it, but
yeah, absolutely. And I think you got to have that conversation with him. Because sometimes he's a kid. He might not verbalize it. So you got to sit down and say, "Hey, mate, how are you feeling? Do you need a rest for a week or two? Do you need to just sort of reset?" Because, the eye test, as Jake loves to say, it tells me that he does need a rest and he does want a rest. That's what it looks like to me. But again, I'm not a mind reader. I don't know. So they need to have that conversation with him and ask him what he wants and what's best for him.
Yeah. No, exactly. This is so off topic, but it popped into my head. How was Ross breaking the phone twice at Adelaide Oval? And then in his press conference going, you need to invest in the infrastructure.
It was pretty funny. And to be honest with you, I don't blame him at that point because I almost broke my phone after a couple of those plays. But yeah, it's another classic Ross moment that will go down in the history books, no doubt.
Yeah, definitely. A quick little activity I wanted to do before we wrap up is we've got a list of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 free agents heading into the off season. So there's a lot of list changes that are going to be made. I'm going to say a name to you, and you say high priority or low priority on re-signing. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So
is this a comparative thing or just like either?
No, just that player on their own merits.
Okay. Sure.
Yeah, okay. Mason Wood.
High priority.
Liam Stocker.
Low priority.
Jimmy Webster.
Low priority.
Tim Membry.
Low priority.
Josh Battle.
High priority.
Seb Ross.
Low priority.
Tom Campbell.
High priority.
Riley Bonner.
Low priority.
Interesting. So there's 8 of those. You picked out Battle, Wood, and did you say Campbell as well? Was high priority?
I said Campbell, yeah.
Yeah. 3 high priority. I would argue Stocker is probably good for another 2 years. Webster, maybe 1 more. Anyway, I was reading that list today and I thought it's going to be a huge off season for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. But then it also begs the question like, well, who else do you have to fill those positions? Because that has to be asked first. It's all right to look at the player as this singular thing and say, okay, well, they're not performing, they're not up to scratch, but who comes in? Who's the next man up for that player's position? And who's like replaceable in terms of that person? If you look at Mason Wood and Tom Campbell, for what they bring to the club, I don't think they are replaceable. And to be honest with you, I'd keep them around for as long as possible, even if they're not playing at AFL level, because it's worth it from a mentorship, sort of, youth growth perspective.
Yeah, no, I can definitely understand that. Anyway, though, heading into West Coast, how do we feel about this game? 1:45 Saturday, Marvel,
Yeah.
our first game at Marvel, for this big streak we're going to have where we don't play anywhere else for the rest of the season. So I guess the conditions aren't going to be a worry. How are we feeling about that? West Coast obviously not going too well. Simo's out the door. What do we want to take away from this game?
To be honest with you, without saying win, I just want us to be competitive and play with dare. I feel like I'm just asking for just the absolute basics, but that's really what it's come to. Play with dare, use the guts, back yourself in, make risky decisions, take the run and carry, move the ball fast, free flowing. Give yourselves the opportunity to score, hit people on the chest, all of these basic fundamental things that we really haven't been doing for most of the year. It's time to start putting this into effect before it trickles over to the next season.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, it's just about finding that balance between offense and defense where we keep our defensive portfolio up and, we keep them to, 11, 12 goals. But then for us, we really get that offensive game going where we're scoring 15, 16 plus. And of course, just playing with that spirit that I feel like we did in the Sydney game, instance on the weekend, Skunk gets thrown to the fence, nobody gets around him to help him up. It's just those little things, get around your teammates, don't let them get thrown around by the opposition. When they're down, help them up. Just play with that St Kilda spirit, and show us why the fans should keep showing up for you to watch. Because I tell you, for me, there's plenty of reasons to keep going and watching, but I know so many people who go, well, there's other things I can do on my Saturday arvo. Show them why they should be showing up to watch you every week.
Yeah. And that's the thing as well. It's all good and well to ask supporters to turn up week in, week out, but at the end of the day, they're giving up good money and good time. And if you're not going to perform and put something on the table for them and they don't show up, well, no one's really going to criticize them for that, because that's what you're putting forward and that's what you sort of get when you deliver that sort of game. But yeah, what are the matchups you're looking forward to on the weekend?
King is always an interesting one against West Coast, but obviously he's not playing. So the first ones that come to mind, I'm not actually all that familiar with West Coast's list. I think obviously Harley's always an interesting point with them, whether we give him the same attention we did last time. That'll be interesting to see. He hasn't been breaking games open the way he was earlier in the year. And then their defense is pretty sound. They've got McGovern, Barras, those sorts down back. So we'll see if our kind of inexperienced forward line can match that. How about you?
Yeah. I'm excited to see our back line match up with their forward line, because they have some seriously dangerous forwards. They do have the ability to kick high scores. Oscar Allen's back. He's an amazing forward. I believe it's Jake Waterman's 100th, so you'd be expecting a pretty big game from him. And then obviously Liam Ryan, if you let him off the chain, he's going to punish you. So I'm excited to see who goes on those players. I'd expect a Wilkie to take Waterman, probably Battle if he's okay to take Oscar Allen, and Liam Ryan's probably, going to go to a Sinclair if he plays halfback, or a Webster to lock him down. But that's where I think the matchup will be great. And then obviously Tim Kelly running through the guts with Jack Steele. That's always pretty fun to watch.
Yep, no, exactly. And so one quick thing I would love to see from this game, because he's come close, especially against Sydney, is for Ari to actually hit the scoreboard, get one of those 60, 70 meters bombs to go through the six. He copped a big foul on the weekend. I don't know if you saw.
I did see that one.
Yeah, but I'd love to see him kick a goal. So, Saints fans, show up. There's still a lot to be excited about. Hopefully the boys can show you why we are still, sitting here talking about the club every week, because we believe that in the direction we're going, we just need to stick to the path, and hopefully we can continue and get performances like we did against Sydney.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else you want to touch on, Sammy, before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's about it. I need a Saints beanie, because my God, it's cold in Melbourne at the moment. But that's about it.
It is. We'll have to hook you up with one through the club.
Yeah, mosh beanie, maybe.
Yeah, get you a mosh beanie. Too easy, mate. Well, Jakey will be back next week, of course, hopefully, if he's recovered from his cold. And we'll see you guys all then. Thanks for tuning in. And can't the Saints get down on Saturday?
Go Saints.